Joining us for today's CISL seminar. I'm just going to give it a couple more minutes to see if we have others who will be joining. So thanks again for joining, and we'll get started in a couple minutes. Okay, I think we'll get going now. So once again, thanks everybody for joining today's CISL seminar series. And we have an interesting topic today. Our speaker is Miranda Mundt from Sandia National Laboratories. She's going to be talking about research software engineering in practice, the software engineering and research development at Sandia National Laboratories. Miranda is a research software engineer in the Department of Software Engineering and Research at Sandia National Laboratories. She partners with the scientific software teams to support their continuous development, improve their state of software development and quality practice. Her research interests include human factors in software engineering, motivation and incentivization in software quality and software quality frameworks. Additionally, she has a dedication to diversity, equity, and inclusion and STEM outreach efforts, particularly as those efforts benefit minorities and women. She is a current member of the steering committee of the United States Research Software Engineer Association and co-chairs the outreach and group management working groups. She also acts as the Families at SC Chair and Inclusivity Liaison to Infrastructure for SC 23. So thanks again to everybody for joining. If you have questions throughout the talk, feel free to please add those to the chat and they'll be read at the conclusion of the talk. And then Miranda will also have a couple opportunities within her talk where she'll pause and ask if anybody has a brief question. So if you have a quick question, feel free to engage Miranda at that point as well. So with that, I'll hand it off to you, Miranda. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug, and hello to everybody. I'm going to share my screen now, so just let me know if you can see it and if it's large enough.
Yes.
Looks
Fabulous.
good.
Looks good.
Thank you. All right. Well, hello, everyone. Doug already gave me a great introduction, but just to reiterate a couple of points there. My name's Miranda. I'm a research software engineer, a member of technical staff in the Department of Software Engineering and Research at Sandia National Labs. And I'm a current member of the steering committee for the U.S. Research Software Engineer Association. I really appreciate you all coming to the talk today. Today, we're going to talk about research software engineering in practice, the software engineering and research department at Sandia. Starting out, I'd like to give a special thanks to my colleagues, Reed Malevich, Dina Vigil, and Jim Willingbrink, who contributed to the publications that this presentation is based on, as well as Josh Tevez and John Bisola for helping me with rehearsing and getting these nice and polished, and other members of the software engineering and research department and the research software engineering community leaders and members at Sandia. So here is our outline for today. So first, I'm going to give you a brief history of research software engineers, where they came from, where the term came from, and where we're going. Then I'll tell you about the formation of the software engineering and research department at Sandia National Labs. And then I'll talk to you about how our department is helping to grow and strengthen the research software engineering community at Sandia National Labs. So kicking us off, let's talk about the history of research software engineers. Many of you I actually recognize from the U.S. Research Software Engineering Association, but some of you, your names are new to me. So maybe you don't know what an RSE is or how we got there. So let's talk about before research software engineer came into existence. In early 2012, there was a small group of academic professionals who met in Oxford, and they asked the question, why is there no career for software developers in academia? Why does that not exist? Well, this question led them to investigate. So the same group with a few more people ended up browsing over 10,000 academic job postings in the UK and out of which they found that there were almost 200 different job titles that all related to academic software development and research development, all under different names. So this led them to create the unifying term research software engineer, or RSE. Now that still doesn't really say what an RSE is, so what is an RSE? There are plenty of definitions, all of which have some key elements in common: research and software engineering. I have the definition from the US Research Software Engineer Association here, which says, we like an inclusive definition of research software engineers to encompass those who regularly use expertise in programming to advance research. We aspire to apply the skills and practices of software development to research to create more robust, manageable, and sustainable research software. Now, I mentioned the RSE movement has been growing since its creation, but it's still very young. However, it just celebrated its 10th anniversary last year, and they had an International RSE Day to celebrate it. But to briefly show you the spread of this term and of this professional designation, that original discussion in 2012 happened during the collaborations workshop, which you can see up there in the top right. The following year, the University of College London formed a local RSE group, and the very first workshop for research software engineers was held. A year later, Manchester formed its own RSE group, and the UK RSE Association was born. The following year, you can see a lot of things happened. There were 3 more UK groups created. There was an RSE Leaders Network created as well. A year later, the first RSE conference in the UK was held, which then led also to the German, the DE RSE group being formed. They had their first conference in 2019, and this trickled down to a bunch of other national associations being created. In 2023, there are RSE associations in North America, in Europe, in Asia, Africa, and Australia and New Zealand, all aimed towards the cultivation of research software engineering and of this term, research software engineer. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit about the one in which the country we live in. So let's talk about the US Research Software Engineer Association. So in the United States, the US RSE, which is the shorthand version of it, this was created in 2018. This association is the premier national association for RSEs in the United States. And it has membership from across most of the states. You see, got like a little section up there that we're missing. We're working on it. These members are varied. Some of them write and contribute to research software across all the sectors. That includes academia, laboratories, knowledge institutes, companies, industry, etc. Some of them write and contribute to research software. So, I'm sorry, some of them are interested in starting a career in research software engineering, but aren't quite there yet. Some of them manage, sponsor, or support RSE in their institutions. Some of them are allies. So they don't identify as RSEs, but they appreciate the work that RSEs do and support it in the work that they do. I mentioned that this has been growing. As you can see, membership has skyrocketed since its creation in 2018. It started with about 40 people. We're now at about 1,700 members, and over 1,600 of those are active on its Slack workspace. And this also reflects the popularity and growth of the term RSE here and across the world. Now let's talk about some of the things that the US RSE does. So first, it's got a mission statement, and it's based on these 4 different tiers: community, advocacy, resources, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. In terms of community, the US RSE seeks to provide a coherent association for all of those who identify with the role, not necessarily the title, but the role of research software engineer, and based on that inclusive definition. But it really aims to provide members of the community with the ability to share knowledge, to create connections, and to share those resources. That leads us to advocacy. So they really US RSE aims to promote RSE's impact on research, especially highlighting the increasingly critical and valuable role that RSEs serve. Their third bullet point here is resources. So they want to provide useful resources to multiple demographics. This includes current and future RSEs, people of various backgrounds. They really want to provide technical and career development to support professional development and to provide access to information and material to support the establishment and expansion of RSE positions and groups within the entire research ecosystem. The last piece is diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI. So they work to actively promote, engage, and improve diversity throughout the broader US research software engineering community. And they want that to be consistent with their full DEI mission statement, which is on their website. And you can go read it if you're interested. Now, some of the things that they actually do, some of their activities. First, members have created numerous working groups over the years. These include things such as education and training, which do what you would expect. They educate and they train. There's a website maintenance group that takes care of the website and the different online presence. There's an outreach group, which again, kind of self-explanatory, does outreach, tries to submit to conferences, make sure that people know that they are welcome and included, etc., and more. Members also organize monthly community calls that cover topics ranging from technical, such as scientific workflows, to management and funding for RSEs, and to teaming and professional development, such as mentorship opportunities, tips and tricks, and whether or not to pursue a PhD as an RSE. They organize a lot of seminars that range from education and training and diversity and inclusion to providing opportunities to interact directly with funders through the Funder Series. Shameless plug here that there is one starting at the very end of this meeting. So if you're interested in talking to a funder, there's one right after here. Those who are looking for jobs can also browse the job boards. Those who are looking to hire RSEs can post there. There are newsletters that are released every other month with updates, reads, upcoming events, and more. And USRSE hosts workshops and conferences. In fact, this year is our very first ever USRSE conference. It's happening in October in Chicago, Illinois. Another shameless plug, the paper deadline is next week. So if you are interested in maybe thinking about submitting to it, you have time. But this is starting to sound a lot like an advertisement for USRSE, I know. And that's not what we're here to talk about today. But I'm going to pause really briefly for any short questions or comments up to this point. All right, hearing none, let's keep going. And let's talk about the Software Engineering and Research Department at Sandia National Labs. So what is that department? Who are we? What do we do? Well, our group, it's a part of the Center for Computing Research at Sandia. And we provide cutting edge research and development in computational science and engineering. Now, our department employs over 20 research software engineers, RSEs, software engineering researchers, SERs, system administrators, and IT service management professionals. Our department provides flexible, on-demand staffing for development, consultation, and support to other departments within the Center for Computing Research, also known as CCR. Our goal overall is to advance both the study and practice of software engineering in the scientific domain. We want to bring software engineering expertise to our lab, but more than that, we want to be innovators who are pioneering new and better ways of working with and thinking about research software. Now, how did we start? Well, our department formed in late 2018, and it was actually the culmination of several years of effort to network RSEs across the Center for Computing Research. The predecessor to the department was this group of people called the Software Engineering Maintenance and Support Group. This was a project, and it was a network of software professionals who were split across many different departments within CCR, all dedicating a little bit of their time to work together to meet common software engineering needs. Things like tools, training, support. Now, SEMS was very successful in this, so successful, in fact, that this spurred leadership to push for the official department. Now, why is that significant? Why bother forming an official department? Well, first, bringing those software-focused staff under one roof enables them to interact more closely with others like themselves. And it opens up opportunities to collaborate and to form this kind of community of practice. Second, computational science and mathematics organizations tend to value software really insofar as the software advances the science, and that makes it hard to build a rewarding career based around working on software itself. So creating an official department has made software engineering a first order concern, a really first order citizen to our parent organization, CCR and Sandia National Labs. And it sends a signal that we value those skills and expertise in our center. Third, this new department also added a manager who had a software focus, which has been a serious boon for hiring. So prior to the creation of this organization, there were several managers who recognized the importance of software-focused efforts, and some hiring slots were used to hire staff to fill those needs. But that was no manager's primary focus, which really limited planning and the ability to strategize and prioritize in this really crucial area of scientific development. So when trying to hire the best software professionals available, it's significantly better to describe a department with a specific mission, the mission being software, and staffed by people who do work similar to the work the potential employee would actually be doing, with a focus that's strongly supported by the center and its management. Finally, it's enabled us to expand our scope to include a research focus. So software engineering research, it's the study of software systems and their development, operation, and maintenance. Research and practice in software engineering have always been deeply interconnected. They go hand in hand. And it was really necessary and naturally expected that we would bring the two together under the same roof in our department. In that sense, we provide not only software engineering as a service to scientific software teams, but we also seek to improve upon the practice of software engineering itself. But how do we do this? What does this look like? For us, our team structure follows what we call the research, develop, and deploy, or RDD, workflow pattern. And this is centered around three principal ideas. We aim to cultivate a critical mass of staff in each of these different capability areas, each of which mutually reinforces each other. Everyone in our department is able to participate in one or more of these areas that they might focus on one in particular as their primary. But that might make you wonder, how are those members distributed? What does that look like? So currently, this is how our staff is distributed. About a quarter of it works on research. More than half works in the develop side, and a little slightly less than half work on the deploy side. And all of you are probably really good at math, and you're looking at this and going, that's more than 100%. What? Well, as you recall, I mentioned that some staff work in more than one area. I am a great example of this. I am represented in all of these groups. I work on fundamental research in scientific software reproducibility. I develop tools, testing pipelines, and specialized services for people within the center and specific projects. And I also support deployed services that are actively in use by our customers. Well, but let's go into detail on each of these activities, and we'll start with research. So our team conducts fundamental and applied research in software engineering. Given the importance of our work for the nation, we have a responsibility to act on the basis of best available evidence or using evidence-based practice. Without sufficient understanding, we run the risk of solving the wrong problem, having the right solutions go unused, or failing to seize emerging opportunities. Now, a key way in which we acquire and retain that understanding is through rigorous systematic investigation, or in other words, research. For that reason, we actively participate in the software engineering research community. So we can bring the best ideas to Sandia National Labs through evidence-based practice. And so we can create new knowledge for improving scientific software. Now, specialists in this area tend to have a PhD in computer science or a domain science and a passion for software engineering. However, this is an area where we encourage those without the PhDs, the more develop and deploy, the RSEs, to participate. Not only are our RSEs, so many R's, involved with research literature reviews and experiments with our stakeholders, they also publish. They publish their own white papers, their experience reports, journal submissions. They do this at workshops, conferences, and more. Software engineering, after all, is an applied science, so we have to be able to hear from both perspectives. Well, so I'll give you some example of some of these. So first, several of our members created a framework for software quality in scientific software development teams. This framework is focused around making right-sized recommendations that are based on the size and maturity and intended use of the project. Another member has created a set of requirements elicitation techniques that are to assist RSEs in asking their stakeholders the right questions in the right ways to make sure that they can do the right work. There's an active project that's looking to extend existing software quality models to include reproducibility as another quality attribute similar to reliability, usability, maintainability. There's a team that consists of several of our department members, plus other lab and academic contributors from across the country, and they created a lightweight software process improvement plan that was geared specifically towards computational and scientific engineering teams. That same team is looking into cross-team collaborations to explore how teams of teams interact with the hopes to improve future teaming efforts. All right, so we've looked at research, but how does this feed into develop? So a key element of our work is teaming with the application and algorithm researchers to provide embedded development, maintenance, and support. We have team members here who focus on development, and they tend to be research software engineers of various stripes. They range from computer science graduates to staff with a background in science or mathematics who have transitioned into a software-focused career. I, for example, have a background in applied mathematics and have moved more towards RSE work. The majority of people in our team generally fit this description. One important type of software development service that's provided by our department, though, is scientific programming. This type of development requires some sort of scientific domain-specific knowledge and skills, such as a familiarity with algorithms and experience using MPI, OpenMP, or CUDA. Our team also provides software development services for core engineering or software engineering needs. These include testing, build systems, and other areas that aren't specific to the HPC domain. Also, as part of our outreach, our team regularly offers training to research on useful topics like Git workflows, accessible design, and inclusive mentorship. Here are just some of the projects that we partner with to provide development maintenance and support. Our first example is Trilinos, for those of you who haven't heard of it. It's a set of reusable scientific software libraries. It's basically a package of scientific software libraries that are meant to be interoperable and to really help you with your scientific software development. Well, members of our department are working to actively streamline testing and improve reliability of Trilinos as a whole. Another example is E3SM. This is the energy exascale Earth system model, the next model or the next future in climate modeling. Members of our department provide embedded programming support. They do things like rejuvenate legacy code, they improve system performance, and they manage the build system. Another example is Pyomo. This is an optimization modeling package that's used in energy systems. Members of the department assist with performance testing, with scientific algorithmic programming, and with data visualization. Okay, so we talked about research, talked about develop. So now let's talk about deploy. How does this feed into deploy? Well, we firmly believe that robust, scalable, and sustainable infrastructure for software projects is vital, critically vital to the scientific computing mission of our center and of the larger scientific ecosystem. For that reason, we have a set of staff who focus on DevOps and IT service management, and they lead these efforts. Case in point, we maintain Jenkins-based build and test farms. We maintain a common dependency management system. We also offer and maintain tools like Jira and Confluence so people can do better project management and collaboration. And we have tailored infrastructure solutions for projects as necessary. One of the things that we do as well is we have custom built tools and services, and I'll show you a few examples of those. One of them is a tool called Watcher. Watcher is a Jenkins plugin. Jenkins, if you don't know what that is an automation tool. Helps with automating processes, running jobs, things like that. So Watcher is a plugin that enables native data visualization. So basically you run your tests, you get your data, and you can visualize it all there in Jenkins. Another offering we have is a tool called RepoMeter. This is a query database and storage tool and service that can pull data from GitHub and GitLab, and it can do that on usage statistics, things that might be of interest for you, tracking impact and changes to your repositories over a long period of time. We also manage and release environment modules for compilers, third-party libraries, and utilities that any research software developer can access. This removes the necessity for each person to install and maintain their own tool chains, as well as reduces some of those interoperability problems where, person A has version 1 and person B has version 2. Now we've talked about develop and deploy, and how does this feed back into research? Well, our team conducts fundamental and applied research in software engineering. And given the importance of our work for the nation, I'm just kidding, guys, we're not going to go through this again. we already talked about. But how do we integrate these roles? Well, we believe that it's important to have this critical mass of skills in each workflow in order to have a holistic picture, a big picture of how to best prioritize, plan, and execute activities. And while we certainly don't have the final say on what the right way is to organize an RSE group, we do believe that this arrangement helps make our team more cohesive and creative and productive. So we talked about these three different roles, this research, develop, and deploy. Well, our research work aims to create new knowledge and to assist in the development and deployment activities. Our development work keeps our research grounded in real-world needs and informs deployment activities. And our deployment work drives research priorities in tooling and support. It's really important in our multidisciplinary team to have this shared mental model, a vision for how all of these pieces fit together. And that's exactly what we've arrived at for our team. In fact, our team is so strong that it actually attracts strong RSE talent. We recently hired somebody who came here because of the opportunities for growth and the feeling for mutual trust and ownership, and really wanting to be a part of one of those RSE groups that makes that happen. Now, I have some more things after this, but I want to pause really fast for any short questions or comments. Okay, hearing none. You might be wondering, okay, great, this sounds awesome, but how do you actually make that happen? How does that work? Well, of course, our model didn't happen overnight. The growth has been staged. So let's talk about the evolution of this department. So we formed in 2019, and originally when we formed, we had 9 members, 9 people in our department. Well, we immediately doubled that. We hired 9 more people, we doubled our staff, we continued our existing work, and we started to build up new work for the new staff. So found new strategic partnerships and more opportunities to help out with other projects across the center. In 2020, we focused on what our manager at the time called forming, storming, and norming, basically team building. We really wanted to work on creating a cohesive team identity, on creating that shared mental model, that vision, and also on really defining our scope of work. What is it that we do, and what is it that we help with, and what do we bring to the center? In 2021, we built upon our strong foundation of deploy and started exploring those other 2 sides, the research and the development side. And that became our core vision statement for our department. So you can see research started out a little slow. So we had 5 papers, 6 talks, not terrible, right? But we had quite a few more of these shared tools and projects that we were supporting. So these are things that, these are all open source, by the way, so you can go and find them, but things like SPAC-CM, Watcher, Loden, Spiffy. We had some projects we supported like Pyomo and Bora Crust, Dakota, E3SM, but we really were focusing still on the SEMS operation and maintenance and the system administration support. Now in 2022, we continued to build on this and we really started to blow up in the different areas. So you can see that in terms of research, we went from just papers and talks to 40+ publications, 7 of them being peer reviewed, 25 of them were presentations and tutorials. We had 9 different department authors. We had grants, interns, and academic partners who started to work with us on doing this fundamental research. In terms of develop, we started taking on training on our new staff and talking to our stakeholders. We took on a lot more scientific programming. We also still maintained our shared tools and project support that we had before. And in terms of both develop and deploy, we started taking on scientific infrastructure. So we started making these environments like shared containers and container projects, such like that, so that we could actually support the infrastructure for scientific software development in the long run. But at the end of the day, let's talk about what this really means for our customers. Because we really want to know what's the bottom line. How does this approach actually affect the products and services that we offer? So in all of our diverse efforts, our goal is to empower domain scientists and mathematicians to work more efficiently and effectively. The ways that our team impacts developer productivity are numerous. Some of them can be subtle, but let's consider the case of a typical scientist developer in our center. And I'll walk you through how we try to make an impact on her life. So first, she's interested in project management. Well, she's able to track her team's work through Jira and Confluence, and we offer and maintain that. Her ongoing research into next generation algorithms is directly supported by an embedded RSE from our department. She wants to be able to do good version control. So to manage her repository, she uses a Git workflow that we set up and we trained her on. And whenever she submits a pull request, because she doesn't want to break her code all the time, well, our tools detect that she submitted this and start launching build and test jobs on our server farm to ensure that her code performs as intended. Her software relies upon a complex system of library dependencies, all of which we seamlessly provision through our environment module system. So she can access that sort of exact environment no matter what machine she's on. Recently, she reached out to our team for a consultation on software design. And we're in the process of compiling peer-reviewed literature and industry best practices to help inform her design-related decisions so she can really practice best practices. Now, she sends an email to her colleague about an interesting talk that she attended by a leading expert in software engineering. We invite him to our own seminar series, so that way he can talk to the wider center. When she encounters a software-related problem, she submits a help ticket to the CCR Help Center, and we operate that. We either resolve her problem or make sure that she knows who to talk to get it fixed. She has a project website to advertise her research papers and to document her code. Well, we helped her build that. So I have something else I'm going to go into after this, but I'm going to pause once again for short questions or comments here. All right, hearing and seeing none. Well, let's talk about how then we engage with the larger community at Sandia National Labs. How do we support and talk to RSEs throughout our laboratories? Well, the beginning of this is actually an interesting story. So in early 2022, several members of our department began reaching out to other groups across the lab to gauge interest in forming a research software engineering community of practice. From these different engagements, from these opportunities to talk to these other groups and these other potential RSEs or people who conduct research software engineering type work, we ended up finding the 9 founding members of what we ended up calling the RSE COP, Research Software Engineering Community Practice, which began officially in September 2022. So our kickoff meeting had over 200 attendees. Our mailing list has over 100 members, and our monthly meetings regularly attract 30 to 50 attendees to come and talk about different topics that are of interest to research software engineers and research software engineering. Similar to the US RSC, we also have a mission statement that we created, and it's also got 4 different branches. The first of the branches, is community. So we seek to provide a feeling of shared ownership and community for those who engage in or are affiliated with the practice of research software engineering at Sandia National Labs and across the Department of Energy National Labs. Our community aims to provide our members with the ability to connect, network, collaborate, and share with each other. In particular, we wish to facilitate embodying a shared value system that we can hold one another accountable for. We value shareability and discoverability. We value transparency around what the community values and builds together. We value connecting people with the right resources at the right time. And we also want to enable effective teaming, both within RSE teams and with RSEs and their scientific software developers. The second tier here is knowledge sharing. So we really strive to enable effective knowledge sharing throughout our community. We really hope to cultivate an accessible collection of resources, such as templates, tools, training materials, things like that, which enable better research software engineering practices and a collective understanding of the larger ecosystem in which we reside. In particular, we want to aggregate existing tools and resources that are available to the community now and create material for those gaps that we identify. And this could be through training, through frequently asked questions, and also through documenting problems that we've encountered and the solutions that we've implemented. So that way we can lessen rework. We also want to share opportunities for wider engagement and outreach. This is things like conferences and workshop opportunities, seminars like this one, and others. The third of our tiers here is better practices. we seek to embody and exercise better software engineering practices across all of our work at Sandia National Labs. We aim to truly adhere to these best practices, which promote quality, scalability, reproducibility, all of those ilities. In particular, we wish to enable better awareness and promotion of right-sized practices. This goes back to that idea of tiered software quality. We want to make solution patterns and knowledge elicitation much more accessible. And we want to make education a primary concern, especially for those who did not have formalized training in software engineering, which, as we know, happens more often than not. The last of our mission statement elements is advocacy, outreach, and impact. So we aim to promote the impact of research software engineering on the work completed at Sandia National Labs. In particular, we want to highlight the critical nature of the work completed and how it enables Sandia's core values and mission. This includes advocating for research software engineering both internally at Sandia and externally with customers and funders. So key to this is recognizing the role, recognizing the accomplishments and the impact of research software engineering internally at Sandia. This could be through performance reviews, promotion opportunities, funding opportunities, things like that. We also want to make sure that we convey the impact of research software engineering externally with our customers, like with our funders or with the people who do our external reviews, things like that. We also want to advocate for continued software engineering funding internally and externally, make sure that the RSE teams like ours continue to have support. And we really want to extend this outreach into the wider complex of Department of Energy National Labs, so we can build a stronger network of advocacy for those who interact with or engage in research software engineering. Also similar to USRSE, we have some activities that we do on a regular basis. And I'll talk you through some of those as well, so you can see how we engage. First, I mentioned this, we have monthly community meetings. These meetings are led by members of the community who come to talk about topics of interest, whether those be technical topics or more soft skills. We also have people who come to talk about some of the things that they've experienced, post-attendance reports for conferences. I've listed a few here. We had somebody come and talk about accessibility and inclusivity in software development. We recently had a presentation on good practices in designing a high rigor system. And we had somebody come to talk about NormConf, which is a conference that took place this last year and probably won't take place again, but hey, we got to hear all about it from the person who attended it. We have monthly newsletters that we release that we call the release notes. I've added the header for you here so you can see how fun it is. In this monthly newsletter in our release notes, we have a change log. Our change log includes information about our last meeting and any sort of changes to the website, which could include new resources, updates to existing resources so people know what they can access and what has changed since the last time they've been there. We have information about our next meeting, the topic, the presenter, the date. We have related events. So sometimes it might not be our community hosted, but it might be interesting to somebody else. This could be internally at Sandia, another community of practice having a meeting that's of potential topical interest, or something external like this, a seminar where we just want to let people know that it's open for attendance and it might interest people. We also have a section about upcoming deadlines and opportunities. These are things like if you want to submit a poster or a paper, or there's a call for panelists. We put those with the most recent deadlines first, later deadlines later, so people just know those opportunities that are coming up. Something that we also do in response actually to many of those upcoming deadlines and opportunities is members of the community will put out calls for collaboration. So in looking through those different calls or submissions that are open, they'll identify one that looks interesting that they think they can collaborate with members of the community on. They'll identify a topic, theme, something that might be of interest to write about, and then they'll put out a call to the community and they'll say, hey, anybody want to work on this topic for this venue with me? We've had several papers written this way, one of which was accepted at the International Conference for Information and Communication Technologies, ICICT. We have another one that we just submitted to the USRSE conference as a long paper. And one of the other things that we do is we have a distribution list. I mentioned we have over 100 members on it, but this is just a list that any member of the community can use. They can use it to send information about submission deadlines, volunteer opportunities. We have several people who are working as workshop organizers or chairs for different committees for conferences as a result of this. They also send out information about upcoming meetings, other upcoming events, and other interesting or useful resources that people might just want to see and they didn't see on the website. Now, this is how we engage internally, but let's talk about how we also engage externally. So there's a lot going on this slide. I'll walk you through it, don't worry. So the RSC COP, of course, we communicate and collaborate with the US RSC Association. We will do this through journal submissions. So we will write things together and collaborate with external partners throughout the US RSC. We'll help organize and coordinate workshops. We'll write blog posts to put on the US RSC website. We find and share volunteer positions and opportunities. And of course, we network. We've actually hired several people at Sandia because of the US RSC job board. In fact, one person we hired in our department who was already working at Sandia and did not know that there was a job posted in our department, except for that it had been on the US RSC job board. So look, internal and external outreach, they both work. We also partner with our academic partners. I mentioned this earlier, where we do research collaborations on things like reproducibility in scientific software. We recruit interns and postdocs from these academic partners. And we also invite speakers. So I mentioned we have the seminar series that we run, and we will invite people from within our academic partnerships to come and talk about interesting topics for scientific software engineering. We also engage with the larger Department of Energy lab complex. So we talk to other RSC groups within those different labs to compare and contrast how we organize and how we work and what our funding models look like to see if we can find something that works best across all the labs. We have these co-hosted seminars, or we talk in each other's seminars just to kind of continue to share this information. And we collaborate on journal submissions together. We recently had ones accepted in the Computing in Science and Engineering journal about for the public good, talking about RSCs in national labs and national institutions. So that's what we've talked about today, just to remind you of the conversations we've had. So we talked about first the history of research software engineers, how in 2012, people came together, came up with this term, and how it's grown and exploded ever since then. It has created things like national associations like the USRSC, and has really created this unifying term, if not actual title, for people who do this sort of work like research software engineers do. We talked about the software engineering and research department at Sandia National Labs. We talked about that research, develop, and deploy triangle, those three different areas of interest, and how they all feed into each other to make sure that we're doing better practices in a more informed way. We also talked about how that department engages with the wider RSC community, both internally at Sandia and externally through this research software engineering community of practice. I want to thank you all for attending the talk today. I've left plenty of time for us to have a Q&A and discussion here at the end. Just as a note, these slides will be sent out, and so there are extra resources and links at the very end. But with that, I will take questions and conversations.
Okay, thanks, Miranda. Please let us know if you have any questions. Raise your hands if you have a question. Otherwise, go ahead and put them in the chat. And Tasia, do you want to take over for the question portion?
Yep, sounds good. Looks like we have one person raising their hand. Jason?
Hey, Miranda, how's it going?
Hi, Jason.
So I'm curious on the training side of this, of your mission. I guess one of the things I've seen here at Sandia is it's not just that RSCs need to exist for the sake of kind of enabling the real work to get done. RSC work is definitely real work. We just pretended it, but anyhow, that's part of the equation. But another part of the equation is upskilling the subject matter experts in their software engineering competencies. You talked a little about it in terms of what kind of training stuff you guys have available. I guess I'm wondering, is it kind of consumer driven? Like somebody needs to come to you and say, hey, I realize I have a deficiency, please train me. Or is there some way of kind of assessing competencies and recommending to folks, like, you're here, you say you want to be here in order to get from point A to point B, this is what you need to do? Sorry, that's a very nebulous question, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
No. That's a great question. And my answer is a little of both.
Okay.
When it comes to things that are more, formalized official trainings, that's really based more on demand. So if there's enough people who say, wow, we really need help with GitHub Actions. None of us know how to use it, but it looks really interesting. We'll go through and we'll make sort of a presentation out of it. Maybe that turns into a training. We recently had somebody in our department who attended a strategies for inclusive mentorship training, like training the trainers, and is now offering training to people within Sandia on how to apply some of those things that were learned. Now, that's one side of it. The other side of it is empowering people to get from, you're at state A, you want to get to state E, and we do that through a lot of these kind of evidence-based best practices. So, we will do these things called rapid reviews where we help them with, particular business related questions. We'll go and we'll accumulate a bunch of information to give them guided steps towards that. Or we'll help with them with a process called PSIP, the Productivity, Sustainability, and Improvement Planning. It's a software process improvement thing. I know, just explaining for other people, right? But so like, we'll give them something like that and we'll walk them through how to use that so that they can figure out, this is where I am now, this is where I want to be, how do I get there? And provide them resources for those steps through if they need them. So it's a little of both.
Okay. I have a follow-on question, but I'll let Helen go first.
Okay, great. I guess mine's kind of related to Jason's question. So you're talking about embedding people. Like, is the goal to then sort of pull them out and create a self-sufficient group or have ongoing support? And how do you fund it? Do you contract time? Do you have like a subscription model? Is it Sandia overhead? How does all that work?
Yeah, so this is another one of those answers where it's a little of both. But so when it comes to embedding, sometimes those are more short-lived, like it's a particular project, like, a particular targeted effort. Like we want to get our test and build system up to a certain standard because we don't know what we're doing. So those ones will generally be more short-lived, a month, however much time that project needs. Some of them are more long-lived. So for example, the Pyomo and the Trilinos and the E3SM, those ones have been, those partnerships have been around since the beginning of the department and still continue. And it's just that as the needs evolve, the participation of the department members evolves with it as well. And those ones are based more on direct funding from the projects. So for things like Trilinos, E3SM, Pyomo, those teams support, and by that I mean they pay for the time of the RSE. There are other efforts though, where, if somebody has a particular need, like I don't know how to use GitHub Actions, can you show me how to do it? Where we'll provide that training as an overhead fund. So there's some amount of overhead funding that comes from the center to support activities that are like consultations or tools and services that support kind of the wider net of the center and the center participants and the center people. So it's kind of a mix of both. So if you want that kind of longer term embedded commitment, that generally comes with funding from that project itself. If you have something that's shorter and more targeted or, hits a wider audience, that'll come from overhead.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah. I see a question in the chat from Gary Granger. How does the software engineering department decide who gets support and how much? Who sets the priorities? So that is a great question. It's kind of threefold on that one. There's actually, in my manager's office right now, there is a Venn diagram of these threefold things. So one of them is interest of the RSC, one of them is capabilities of the RSC, and one of them is, availability or like impact of that activity or that contribution. So we try to partner with these different groups to make sure that we're aligning with our interests with those groups. So me as a person with an applied math background, talking is hard. Applied math background, I'm going to gravitate more towards things that will use that skill because I speak that language, if you will. So I'm able to kind of bridge the gap between, oh, you have this need in your software that's based on this math concept. Let me feel like I can understand both of those and can make that happen. So there's a little bit of that goes into it. How much is dependent on availability of staff and availability of funding. So if you have somebody who really needs the help and they need it for an extended period of time, but they can only afford to give, 10% of some person's time, well, that's how much time they have. If you have someone who has more available funding and, wants more bodies, they want more time, they want all the time in the world, it's going to be the balance of, okay, well, how much can we really give you based on the other people who are requesting this as well. So we have more people than we can satisfy their needs for. Let me put it that way. So we have had to say no to things because they either didn't align with the capabilities of the people in the department, or we just didn't have the available, funding quantity that they wanted for that. I hope that answers your question, Gary. Let me know in the chat. Okay, great. Brian, I'll get to you in a second. Chris Webster sent one just before you raised your hand, so I'll answer that really fast. Chris Webster, it looks like Sandia is about 11,000 employees. How many software engineers total? So Sandia is a bigger picture than I'm drawing you here. The Center for Computing Research is about 200 to 250 people. It's one of the sub-centers within Sandia. So we've got about 20 people in our department for that larger center, so about 10% of that center. Sandia as a whole, very different picture. I don't have a good picture. I don't have a good percentage for you for Sandia as a whole. But for the center, my center, it's about 10%. Okay, Brian.
Yeah, sorry, needed to adjust my camera. I was going to ask you about, getting interest and getting active and willing participants, but you just said that you have to turn people away because you are in greater demand, which is a great problem. So maybe I'll change the question a little bit and ask, do you think about or have any concerns about that the department's services are being equitably distributed or accessed across the organization in different science realms, different engineering realms? And if so, what do you do to try to perform that outreach or just make sure you're being equitable as a service?
It's a great question. I'm also going to answer your somewhat implied question, which was about culture. This is something I left out a little bit in the beginning, which is we did have a slightly uphill battle for culture. So our management bought into the idea, right? They're the ones who pushed it. They bought into this idea of having, a centralized software engineering expertise department. And they're really the reason that we were able to be what we are today. Is this kind of big main champions who said yes, we need this department. And it was a struggle for probably the first 2 years to show why we were important where we were and not somewhere else, right? Sitting over with the IT services departments, which is somewhere entirely different from our center. So it took us a while to kind of build that confidence and customer base. But once we got there, people really appreciate our services now. It just took some time. So in terms of your second, your actual question, which is about equitable distribution of resources. So I don't know yet if we are mature enough to have had to really sit down and consider the strategy behind equitably distributing our work. Because we were an existing, there were a lot of people who were already on projects when the department already formed. There was kind of this implication that, oh, we've got to keep up those partnerships. We can't abandon them just because we have a new department. And so some of those have continued to be prolonged. And I'm not in a position to say whether or not they should continue to be prolonged. I have no idea. But it's one of those things where we had this kind of historical expectation coming into it that we're trying to sustain as well as trying to branch out. So generally speaking, I will say though, we try to balance available funding and impact. So we, when it comes to consultations, this kind of overhead fund money, anybody can have that. They just have to ask. That's entirely reach out to us and we will do it for you. And if you don't know that you can reach out to us, that's part of our outreach, is making sure people know that. Oh, you have a question and you want to have a quick consultation about how to do XYZ thing. Sweet, let's talk about it. We'll set up an hour. But that requires us to let people know. Beyond that, when it comes to those embedded projects, that one's much more strategic and has a lot more implication on that. Like, what level of funding and time do you want? Like, what level of funding do you have? What level of time do you want? And what capabilities are you looking for? And then we really have to kind of balance that with the available staff and the available time. All of us are fragmented. All of us work on different projects all the time. So you got to kind of work within those constraints. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Yeah. Jesse?
Hi, Miranda. I'm just going to jump off with the last thing you just said. I'm just curious how much say do RSEs or you have in what you get to work on? Like, if you're like, I'm tired of math, I want to do biology, kind of, do you get to make that decision, or are you kind of told from up above, like, no, you have to work where we tell you to work?
In our center and with our management, we do have a lot of say in what we do. I think in my time so I've been in the department since late 2018 when it formed. Mid 2019. So it formed in late 2018. I joined in mid 2019. So when I started, I was doing 2 projects primarily. I'm still doing one of them because I really like it and it aligns with, with the portfolio work that I like to do. But I'm now doing, 3 others, that one of which I lead, one of which, just kind of like made sense because of the capabilities that I had. And one of which that I co-lead because it has to do with research and it's just really interesting. But when I started, I was like solidly just on the deploy side of that triangle. And I've shifted, so I'm on all 3 sides. So we have a lot of say in what we do. But there is enough oversight from our management to say, okay, but we really need somebody who can work on this, whatever this is. So, you have the capabilities. Does one of you have the interest and can I assign you to this?
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, no problem. We're almost out of time, but we probably have time for one more question. Oh, Doug.
Yeah, so I was just curious, have you been able to measure or quantify any impact since you've made this organizational change in research productivity or outcomes? So that's one aspect. So maybe I'll ask that first, and then I have a follow on.
Sure. So we haven't had as many formal measurements as we've had informal. And I actually was just saying to one of my colleagues before this presentation that, it would have been great to just get like a couple of those snippets from people to say, oh, this was helpful to me for XYZ reason, because we've heard those, but I don't know if we have them written down anywhere. But I'll say, for example, some of the projects that we've worked on, we've helped increase their productivity. And these are the more measurable things, right? Like there's a project that we worked on that one of us worked on where their testing infrastructure, the average amount of time it took to run a test suite was 6 hours. And after engagement with the embedded RSE, it went down to 1 hour. That one's measurable. You can definitely see the immediate return on investment on that one. Some of them are a little bit less quantitative in that it's, our team is now working better together. Great. I don't know how you measure that.
Right. Maybe there's surveys or something before.
Yeah.
And then also, working in a scientific organization, scientists are given credit for the number of papers they publish and their research impacts and those types of things. A lot of that research impact couldn't happen without the contributions of RSEs. So how do RSEs, get credit, or how are they recognized for their research impacts? And this is for, cross-disciplinary research, not just research on how do I improve computational efficiency and those things, just the actual impacts of, the broader science paradigm.
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's something that we are still working on creating a standard for. Something we have started doing for some of these projects that, we know that the expected output of it is going to be a paper or a presentation. We requested at the very least they put in acknowledgement. This work was enabled by members of the research software engineering department at Sandia National Labs in particular, blah. There are times as well where if we contributed to the ability for that, for that data to be created or generated or whatever, that we'll also ask that they consider putting us as a co-author And this has sometimes worked and this has sometimes not, which is why I said we haven't quite done a standard. But I will say that I think, at least in our institution, we're very fortunate that most of the people there like to give recognition for work that has helped. So, they'll put us on their websites or they'll mention us in their papers or whatnot and say, like, oh, this person was a contributing member of XYZ team. But it's a good question. There's actually an active group looking into that exact question within the US Research Software Engineer Association, trying to figure out what's the best way. What is the best way to kind of give recognition to this type of work?
All right, thank you. With that, we've hit the top of the hour. So thanks again for your talk, Miranda, and thanks to everybody for joining, for all the good questions today. And please join us for the next CISL seminar, and we'll provide information about that as it becomes available. All right, everybody, have a good rest of your day.